Hello everybody and welcome to this short video where we want to talk about a very special case with Anna here. Hi Anna.
Hi Bernhard.
And let me maybe start telling you a bit how I got to know Anna. So I'm Bernhard Sterchi, I'm the managing partner of Palladio Trusted Advisors. And when I started my company 7 years ago, it was actually almost 8, one of the first courses that I did for senior managers at ABB, one of the participants was Anna. And she was in a very special situation at that time, had a very special job. And we're going to talk about that job. And I was very fascinated how she managed it, what she did, and also, let's put it a bit like what moral backbone you showed while you were doing these things. And it was very interesting also to see the effects that this had on the other managers who didn't have such a job to do, but were very impressed as well. And the effect of my observing this was also that I wanted to find out more about how you got to do that, where you learned these things. And it turned out that there was this company intake partner that had helped you previously and where you learned things. And today, the situation is like that I am working every now and then together with intake partner, and you, Anna, you are constantly working with intake partner. So there must be something to it, I think, also for our larger audience. How, what is it that is part of this learning, of this offering that hooked us, both of us, in this way? So maybe you start, telling a little bit more about where you come from, but also what special job you had at this time.
Yeah, as you said, Bernhard, right now I'm fully supporting companies in making their strategy happen together with intake partner. But at that time, I was the local unit manager for ABB unit in Switzerland. And when I took that job, it was already decided that the factory was going to close and move to Vietnam. And that was going to happen within a time frame of 1.5 years. So that was the challenge that I had, to be leading this factory and supporting both the customers in transitioning to the new factory, building up safety stock, for example, but also keeping the quality during this time, although all the employees knew that they were going to be out of a job 1.5 years later.
It's interesting. I remember, to anybody, to any other manager, as they were there in the program, this didn't sound like a dream job, right? They considered themselves very lucky that they didn't have to close their own unit. So I would like to know a bit more because you chose it exactly when it was already clear. So you chose that job just for this reason. How come? What was your motivation to do that?
Yeah, I had 3 sides of my motivation, and the first one was actually the integral management that I learned within ABB already in 2003. That's a way of working, a way of leading a company where you integrate everyone in the changes that you're doing, in the strategy that you're implementing. And a strategy, this was also a strategic decision that we were implementing. We were closing the factory. It's not a positive one, but it's still, that's a part of the strategy. So to use all these tools that I also had been using in my previous management roles, but wanting to see if they really work, because if they really work, they work also in such a negative, with such a negative challenge. So that was the number one.
I think it's interesting, many kind of what models or processes that consultants offer, tools and solutions that they offer, and the examples they bring, they are so often nice weather examples. A company that was already doing fine, and then they got this wonderful solution and it did even better, and everybody's very happy. And so I think it's very interesting that we are taking this story, this example, which shows the other side. I mean, it happens that a company has to close or the factory has to close down. And so the question is, how can you do that in the best possible manner? And what does it actually mean to do it in the best possible?
Yes, yeah,
But you're
exactly.
talking about two other motivations that you have.
Yeah, the second one was this was taking on a unit, meaning having the full profit and loss responsibility, etc. And I've been heading a supply function before, so it was also the natural step that I wanted to take on more responsibility. But I was also attracted to that it was actually time limited to 1.5 years, because I just got my first child. And not knowing, can I have a full-time job at this level and still be a mother, and does it fit together? So it was nice. Then I knew after 1.5 years I will take a new decision what I do, because I didn't have a job afterwards either.
By the way, did you worry at all that that this kind of job would cause you like sleepless nights and difficult feelings that maybe would then make it even more difficult to find your new way with family, mother, and at the same time doing the job?
Yeah, absolutely. And it did sometimes also, because it is people's lives and their work, and they are passionate about it and how to support them. So absolutely, it's very hard to go through a process like that untouched.
But you decided to take it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, let's have a look a bit more about this task. You mentioned already, so it was about the factory, it was about to be shut down. Why? What was kind of the case around this? Why was this situation like that?
Yeah. Chinese competitors had come onto the market, and over the last 2 years, the market price dropped 60%. So it was really fierce competition. And although we sold almost 80% internally ABB, of course there is the cost pressure. And ABB tried to develop a new technology, but when starting mass production, we realized, they realized this will not work. It won't make it. So that was the background to the decision. But with that said, it's also a big risk to take when you sell 80% internally, and this component is just less than a percentage of the cost of the system that you sell. There was a lot of feelings, of course, why can't ABB just swallow that this cost and let it be the production where it's good quality, etc.
But about the quality, I
was just laughed when I said that one.
Yeah, but because I think I remember there was this element that, yes, the piece that you were producing was about 1% of the final piece that ABB sold to their customers. At the same time, is there something about it was in terms of the risk of that final piece, like breaking down and with all the costs that would be pulling after, that there was something with that as well. Could you elaborate that a bit?
Yes, it is a very critical component in the system, although it's relatively low cost part of it, but it's not allowed to break. But I also laughed when I said good quality, because we delivered good quality out of the factory, but one issue that we had was cost of poor quality. So when I started, we had around 15% of our turnover as quality cost, and of course that is a horrendous number. But we managed to always catch it in-house. So we never delivered bad quality out. Yeah. But that was also one of the issues, of course. When you look at it from a top management perspective, they are expensive and they don't have their quality cost under control. No, they are in a high cost country. So there was probably quite a number of arguments for taking this decision.
Still, I can imagine, and we're going to talk about this cost of quality again later in the conversation. But I think what I would like to underline is, if I understand you correctly, there is this argumentation that would say, okay, we take a production to somewhere where they don't know how to handle the technology. As a consequence, it's not so sure whether they can deliver the same quality as we do. The impact is going to be that risk could be bigger with this big end product that they're
Yeah.
selling. And we are saving, what, 1/3% of its cost for it. So was this kind of, when I remember when I hear that, I thought, as an employee who, as a consequence, has to look for another job, I would say, oh, this is very cynical. That doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
Was this kind of this reaction? Because that changes, it's one thing when you say, okay, the market is bad, guys, we have to close down because there's no market anymore. That's one thing. But it's another thing when you say, there is pros and cons why we should be closing down.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that caused also quite a lot of frustration and anger, and a bit of bitterness also, because that ABB factory was also in the same country. So it's sort of our colleagues across the city. Why aren't you helping us in this situation? So that didn't make it easier.
Now, maybe the other side of the story is also interesting to understand a little bit. So when you went through this and in the end you closed that factory, what were the results of your way of doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can stay on the quality topic actually, because we had these 15% quality cost, and we put this on the table for everyone to see also. And we didn't have one big quality issue, because then you can put your best engineers on it and you can solve it. But we had a lot of small ones, meaning every step of our process contributed to this quality. And making this transparency and also giving people more responsibility in this process. We actually, the last year that we produced, we cut it in half, the quality cost, which is totally contradictory to what we thought would happen, because we thought, oh my goodness, our colleagues, everyone will not focus on quality, on time delivery, because everybody is just worried about their own job and how am I going to find a new one, and being angry also about the situation, etc. So that was quite remarkable. And looking at almost all our KPIs, because I sat down, when I started, I sat down with my management team and we started listing, okay, what do we believe will happen in this situation? So quality will go down, on-time delivery will go down, cost will go up, we will have more short-term sickness, I have a headache on Monday morning or a stomach ache on Friday afternoon, etc., because people are not motivated. And in fact, at the very end, we saw that all these KPIs showed the opposite result. So that also called us to really start to analyze what happened in this process.
Which is kind of KPIs for people's engagement.
Yes, exactly. Like the short-term sickness leave, for example. Or we also thought, okay, everybody will look for a new job. And in the beginning, everybody rushed and wanted their interim, interim credentials to be able to apply for new jobs. But at the very end, a lot of people got new jobs and asked their new employer to let them stay on until the last day, because they wanted to be there and finish it in a good way, and made that deal with their new employer. And I find that totally amazing. Instead of just getting out as quickly as you can from such a depressing situation.
Now, that kind of result would already make me at least, very curious as to how you did it. But before we go there, let's have a look also at the kind of the hard business results, concerning the performance, but also concerning the whole project, which I imagine was budgeted and planned and so on.
Yes. First of all, we kept the time plan. As I mentioned, we cut the cost of poor quality by half. We also cut the whole project cost in half. And that was more than a whole year turnover. So yeah, it's quite a saving.
Yeah.
A very nice result. And over 95% of our co-workers had a new job when we closed. We also investigated and asked our customers concerning on-time delivery and quality level, and they didn't experience any decrease. I mean, we could have improved our cost of poor quality by just sending scrap to the customers, but that was not the case.
So that now I hope our viewers can understand also why we chose this story, because it would make everybody very curious in terms of what can I learn from this. So now let's delve into this a little bit about the how. You know, what did you do, what happened, and what can we learn out of this that somebody can also transfer maybe into situations both as crisis, I mean, we are in Corona times, but also in, as I said, the nice weather management, what somebody can use to build this communion of a good way of managing culture and employee engagement and being very respectful to employees, and at the same time producing very good business results. Maybe for a start, just again to make the frame, how long did this whole thing take? This whole
1.5 years.
It was 1.5 years. So let's have a look a bit what happened in this 1.5 years. Yeah, I leave it open to you. What do you think? What was maybe the most impactful thing amongst everything that you did to create that result?
Yeah, I think already from the start, when my manager took the decision to involve all co-workers, meaning telling everyone 1.5 years before closing that this is happening and being transparent with it. I think that was really crucial, because normally when you close a factory, you have a big secret and a separate project. But everybody's sensing that something is going on. And then 3 months before the closing, you lay everybody off, and it's a big shock, and people just have to deal with that in a very short time span. But taking that decision, I think, is really brave, because of course everybody could have left, and we would have been standing there having to produce 1.5 years of production with no coworkers. So I think that one, to trust them.
There's something about that. To what extent was the decision to close to the employees a surprise? Because, you know, to what extent had they already a feeling in terms of, yeah, we're doing our work, but as you were mentioning quality cost, you were mentioning the international competition that showed cheaper opportunities to produce the same product. You also mentioned that there was a failed project to find a replacement. So, I mean, to what extent were people already on the feeling kind of, you know, I'm not really happy here because we are not really doing a good job. We can't be proud of our job here. Was that the case, or were people left kind of, left aloof from that, so that they didn't understand these parts? What was the situation?
I think partly they had a feeling that we could be doing better. But I also think it was a big surprise that the factory was going to be closed. The severity of the situation, I don't think anybody knew before sort of that big information session where everybody's sitting there and the top management is delivering the message. And I say that because of seeing what happened with quality, for example. When we started to be transparent, that this is how it looks, and every one of us can contribute into it, and also leaving it up to people to find what is their contribution to improve this situation, we could cut it in half. I'm not saying that that would have saved the factory, but a lot of things you can influence if you involve everyone, so they have a decent chance to actually help out with the situation.
So to be precise, so people before did not really know that quality cost was so high and did not really know that they had an impact on that high number.
No.
Okay. So that made a big difference. Yeah.
And looking at other things that we did, we also put a work structure in place. I wanted to put the full strategy engine work structure in place that I learned in Sweden. And I started it up with all the team leaders and the department leaders. And in the beginning, they were really convinced, yes, this is a very good way of working. But when they put that into the context of how much workload we had, both operationally but also emotionally, they said, okay, my goodness, we can't start a fully new way of working at the same time as doing this. So please, Anna, strip it to the most essential parts that you think we really need. So for example, I kept...
Wait, before you go there, maybe, so I understand it correctly, you have learned in the previous job, you have learned a whole set of structural elements that you use, which defined a way of working. And now you were going about this in a very pragmatic way and said, okay, we have a special context here. We're not going to introduce the whole set. We are going to pick some elements which are essential to make a difference here in this context.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look. What were these elements?
Yeah. One of them was to meet everyone on a very regular basis. So we put up a monthly meeting where the whole unit met together to create the transparency around all these topics. Both, I mean, quality topics, but also transparency around the closing. So if somebody got a new job, we also listed that. If something was happening to moving of equipment or to the customers, we also showed that and really tried to have a dialogue around this. What does it mean? So having these very regular meetings was one. We also had other regular meetings, like for example, realizing that we are humans and we need to deal with this as humans also. For example, the department or group leaders, they were losing their jobs, but they were also supporting their own co-workers losing their jobs. So of course there was a lot of fear and frustration in this. So we, as a management team, we also had one meeting where we said, okay, this is just to let steam off. Here we can be angry and frustrated and find this is shit, and also say it, to find ways to deal with the whole situation. And I think the team leaders spent a lot of time with people, talking to people. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What kind of support do you need? And I think that in turn helped, that it started a self-going living process among the people, starting to support one another. So for example, HR put up a board in production where they hung ads for other ABB jobs. But this board came alive from itself. So somebody had an uncle at the post and they had an opening, so he posted that, or a little note that Doug blah 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 is looking for someone in logistics at that company. So really supporting one another started to happen. And I think, of course, all of us were in the same situation, so that's also helping probably.
When you mentioned these big meetings, which to me sound like what's the nature of the business situation we are in? It's kind of there, this general kind of view of the situation, and you have more smaller meetings like the one that you said, let's address the emotions. Now, something that I've learned with being inspired by your experience with working with Intech partner, there is this nice word of structural handrails.
Yeah.
Because the idea behind that would be that you can't enforce a certain way of how the culture works, how behavior and the mindset works, but you can invite to certain directions. What do you think? What were like cultural or mindset effects of this big meeting, for example, where you have this kind of common, what's the state of the situation, even if it's a part of that situation that the individual was not involved in, but it's just kind of, let's share and have a common view.
Yeah.
You observe like impacts of that on the behavior and mindset side.
I think transparency, for one. There we were really transparent also about uncomfortable topics. So that made it much more easy for people to talk about it among the peers, but also with me or with their own manager. So it was sort of taking the lid off and saying everything is okay to talk about. So I think that was one effect. Another structural handrail I used and said this we really need was a coach, a leadership coach. So all the managers having a coach, and I think that is good. I find it always good because it allows you a neutral discussion partner and fresh eyes, etc. Even if you don't do it in an integral management way exactly. So we actually used a leadership coach that had been coaching them a year back or something like that to get that kind of support in. And that also says indirectly it's okay to get help. You don't need to do all of this alone.
I think could there also be that's at least the part I was thinking about this meeting, to let off steam and to tell about what you feel is bad. That in such kind of projects, I imagine there is a high risk of people being very double-faced, very very cynical, and faking it, and being not talking about their true opinion, not talking about the true intentions, which of course makes it very very difficult to cooperate on any kind of level. Could you suspect that something like that was at play, triggered by these meetings?
I think in the beginning it was quite a lot there. Also me coming from the outside, that had the pros and cons. I think on the one hand it had the pro that I come with fresh eyes and I'm not so emotionally attached to this, etc. But also in the beginning, before people knew what can I say, is it okay to say this, and there I think it was quite a lot of maybe going out into the corridor and swearing about the situation, but in the meeting, everything is fine.
And that changed.
But on the same, sorry.
Did that change over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when also that we had this meeting where we could let off steam helped that one to say, yeah, it's okay to be angry. I fully understand it. You've been here 15 years and this is your blood, sweat and tears. And now it's going to be closed. Yeah, so that's...
Can you say something about what were changes that happened in the way that decisions were taken?
Yeah, we said to ourselves as management team that we need to really trust people in this process. So one good example was the maintenance guys. They also knew what we knew. They knew exactly what equipment will be transferred to Vietnam, what will we scrap and what will we sell afterwards. And they also know what kind of maintenance and spare parts are needed, etc. And sort of saying to them, we trust you not to overdo the maintenance, you know the full situation and you know the machines much better than we do. So do what is necessary to take us through these 1.5 years in a good manner. And that actually helped us to have more uptime in production than what we ever had before, which in turn then helped us with the on-time delivery, because it's much easier when you don't have unplanned stops, for example, and not having a huge cost for maintenance. So.
Did you observe a lot of difference in the way that people took it? I mean, I imagine, already things like who is young and still life is full of opportunities, whereas older people, or family, not family, mobile, not mobile, and so on. But what could you observe in the difference that people took it?
Yeah, as you say, young and older, and especially having a family and maybe the wife is not working, there you could really see the fear of, my goodness, will I find a new job and what does this mean, etc. But they also quite quickly realized that they were attractive on the job market, because, as I said, everyone went out to look for new jobs in the beginning, also realizing, yes, there are jobs out there, but with the growing engagement in what we were doing, they also took the decision they want to stay until the very end of the closing. And I think one big advantage here was the attitude of the team leaders and the department leaders, also really going out and talking to people, involving people in this process. And we try to also do it in a systematic way of people influencing how will this process look like, both as teams but also as individuals. I mean, I think that is one of the most important needs that we have as humans, to understand why this is happening and be able to influence the process. It might still be a goal that you don't like, but if you can be involved in the process, it's so much better than somebody dictating it for you.
You mentioned these people staying to the very end and maybe also negotiating with their future employers. Did you encourage that in any way?
Yes,
helpful for you, wasn't it? You didn't have to use temp employees.
Yeah, absolutely. We did put a bonus for the ones who stayed. We deliberately put that quite low, so it was less than 1 month's salary. With that thought, it's for them as individuals, it's better to find a job than to get a bonus long term. So that was the reason to set it quite low, that it doesn't end up to be a golden chain to something that is actually going to end.
It's interesting because the way you tell it, it sounds like there was a consideration about how, in a way, how honest you were in terms of what you believe that is more important from the point of view of the employees. At the same time, one could probably also think, if you increase the extrinsic motivators, then whatever intrinsic motivation was there, that at that time you could already, I imagine you did this decision only during, not from the very beginning of the period.
Yeah.
So you could already observe that there was an element of intrinsic motivation, and you would probably have destroyed that a bit when you said, "Oh, guys, we're making deals with you now."
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It strikes me you didn't appeal, as in your management role, you didn't appeal as on this transactional level very much in terms of, okay, we have to make deals about how we get through this here.
No. I mean, over the years, I've been a manager over 10 years in total, and I met a lot of people. And I on my right hand, I can count the people that don't want to do a good job. everybody else really wants to do a good job. And if they don't do a good job, it's due to other factors than not wanting. It's maybe about not understanding, or not being able, or don't have the competence, etc. So viewing it from that point of view also, I trust people to do a good job, and try to take obstacles away from not being able to do a good job. And that we really saw. For example, we got 5 Vietnamese that came to Switzerland for training. And before they came, my managers, they were quite worried, and they asked me, should we put Securitas in? Will there be fights in production?
They're the guys who are going to steal their jobs, right?
Yes, exactly. They are going to train the guys that are going to steal their jobs. But my gut feeling said, no, we will not have any problems, because they are proud of what they are doing. And what they are doing is important to them. And if it's important that the new guys that takes it over also do it right and good. And that was really what happened. And neither the Vietnamese nor the Swiss were really good at English. So they were talking with their hands and taking pictures and films and getting a dolmetscher and really making the best of it. And also the Swiss guys inviting the Vietnamese guys a couple of times for lunch, for example. So and I think that really proves if the job is important to you, you also want the one taking it over to do it well.
To me, it sounds a bit, sometimes if you, as a leader, if you behave in a way that assumes that people are of a certain nature, you make sure by that people are of a certain nature. They respond the way, in a way you trust them. They want to prove that they're trustworthy to you.
Yeah, it's like what you call you get the answer, sort of, that
self-fulfilling prophecy kind of.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Is there any other considerations about your leadership role that you had in this situation?
Good question.
I mean, that was already about the leadership role. Yes. But especially when you compare it to what you did before, where you managed a stable business and, as I said, like nice bad weather kind of situation. What do you take more from this? Before we talk about structure, about the structural handrails, but more on the personal side, kind of how you appeared as a leader, how you behaved as a leader. What did you take from that time?
First of all, when you put it like that, what I take with me is an amazing feeling of teamwork. Teaming up around such a difficult challenge. It's something, it will never leave me. These memories and this experience. So I think it's made me very much more sure of how I want to be as a leader and what I want to see as leadership in a company. Always sort of going back to this experience, remembering it. I think it suited me also quite well because I didn't try to be anything else than what I'm simply am, and that really worked well in this situation. I don't know if you understand. I see your puzzled look now, Bernhard. Not trying to be, I'm the manager and I'm going to fix this, but just try to deal with the situation and also a bit go with the flow. I think maybe that's even more important in such a negative challenge or in a crisis situation, that you can't plan everything. You have to trust what you're doing and look at it as a process simply.
I was looking like that because I remembered some situations that confirmed this from another side in that training at the time, when the different senior managers in the training talked about their situations, and you constantly came with the news stories from these situations the several times that we met in the training. And I think to me it's more like you have, this is not about knowing what is right and what is wrong. It is about knowing what's worth testing, and in terms of your own behavior and what effects it could have. And I had this impression your tests were of like from another league. People were listening very attentively, because in a way the level of, and again, let's be humble about it, the moral backbone that you, in case you didn't have it before, you learned it very quickly in that situation, that made you kind of be more clear about, what's your conviction, what's not your conviction, what's the part that you don't know, and you name it, and you put, ask yourself, where is the limit of that part? And as a consequence, there is, I repeat myself, as a consequence, there is more consequence, consistency to your approach, which again means that other people, it's easier for other people to know, whom they're dealing with. Maybe that kind of test situation, or the situation that proves, but that puts you to the test, helps probably anybody, if you don't shy away from this task, to develop this kind of quality. At least that's what I remember, how your colleagues reacted to your situation and your role in that training. So it confirmed what you were just saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, in a sense, this also started to lead me to where I am today, and helping other companies working this way with integral management. Because I feel as a manager, I can just influence my own area. But I think this is so important that we start to lead our companies in a new way. I want to do it in a larger scale, and being a consultant, that's one way of doing it.
I think it's a wonderful way of ending it. Well, Anna, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We are looking forward to many more observations of how these kinds of learnings can have an impact for many customer organizations, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you.